I still remember the way the spoon clinked against the bowl when Grandma asked me, casual as anything, "Are you satisfied with the 1,100 I send you every month?" Like she was asking if the pork roast came out dry. I blinked. What money? That was it. 5 seconds of silence. Enough for the bottom to fall out of my world. My mom dropped her fork. My dad, usually the loudest one at the table, didn't say a word. His face drained to the color of the tablecloth. I'd lived 46 years, thinking I had a pretty good sense for when something fell off. I'd worked the last 19 at a warehouse on the west end of Columbus, forklifts, shrink wrap, overtime when I could get it. I budgeted like clockwork. My rent, my car, my lunchbox habits. I knew every dollar I made. And never once did I account for an extra grand floating in. The mashed potatoes cooled on my plate. Everyone stared at my parents. Evelyn, my grandmother, God bless that woman, looked more puzzled than angry. "I've been mailing those checks to your folks' address since you moved out of that apartment complex." Harold said it was easier than updating everything. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe, really. Later, when we were alone in the driveway, I asked my dad what the hell was going on. He didn't look me in the eye, just muttered something about Brian needing help and how things got complicated. I felt a cold sweat creeping down my back. That's how it started. Not with a knock on the door or a court letter. With one simple question over Sunday dinner. That's how I found out my parents had been cashing checks meant for me for 3 years. And worse, my brother had taken out a loan in my name. Turns out I didn't just lose $1,100 a month. I gained $40,000 worth of debt I never signed for. It was a sunny day in late August. Warm breeze, crickets still loud, tomatoes fat on the vine. The kind of day that makes you think everything's all right. It wasn't. It took me 2 full days to really let it settle. At first, I thought maybe Grandma had made a mistake. Maybe she mailed the checks to the wrong name. Maybe my dad was holding the money in some weird old-school family account. You know how older folks think sometimes, like it's all just family money, floating in the air until someone needs it. But no, it was worse. On Tuesday night, I showed up unannounced at their place. Same house I grew up in. Still smelled faintly of lemon pledge and old pipe smoke. My mom looked startled to see me. My dad didn't even pretend to be surprised. He just stepped aside and let me in like he'd been waiting for this since Sunday. We sat in the living room, me in that same threadbare recliner I used to sink into as a teenager, and I told them straight. I wanted the truth. No more dodging. No, it's complicated. Just facts. Turns out it was complicated, but not in the way they wanted me to believe. 3 years ago, Brian came to them in a panic. Owed money to someone. Big money. Not the kind of debt you talk about in front of polite company. He begged for help. My parents, instead of letting him fall on his face or calling the cops, decided to temporarily borrow my identity. They figured I'd never know. I had steady work, a decent credit score, and I didn't need the money. They even opened a new P.O. box just for the loan paperwork. My name, their address, the checks from Grandma, they went straight into the same account. A neat little system. I felt sick, like I was watching a slow-motion car crash, and I was behind the wheel without knowing it. Mom cried. She said they were going to tell me. Eventually, but the words rang hollow. Dad just kept saying he did what he had to do. I couldn't believe how calm he was about it. Like it was just another bill that got paid late. Brian, of course, was nowhere in sight. I drove home without saying goodbye. That night, I dug out every bank statement I had, every unopened envelope I'd been too tired to deal with over the past couple years. Buried under junk mail and pizza coupons were 3 letters from a loan company I didn't recognize. One was stamped final notice. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. And my name was the one carrying the weight. The funny thing is, looking back, I should have seen it. There were signs, little things that didn't add up. A denied credit card application last spring. A higher car insurance quote that I chalked up to just the market. Even the occasional late payment I didn't remember making. I blamed the bank. I blamed stress. Never once did I think of blame my own family. And that's the worst part. You don't expect the people who raised you to rob you blind. You grow up hearing about scammers and strangers and identity theft through some overseas hacker in a basement. But this was done with my childhood photo still sitting on the hallway shelf. Wednesday morning, I called off work. Told my boss I was dealing with a family emergency. He didn't ask questions. Warehouse folks get it. Everyone's got their own mess to deal with. I spent the whole day on the phone. Credit bureaus, loan companies, fraud departments. Each call like peeling back another layer of rock. Turns out, the loan had been opened almost exactly 3 years ago. Right around the time I had a minor surgery and let my mail pile up. Coincidence? Not a chance. The bank rep I spoke to, A woman named Carla, very no-nonsense, told me plainly, "You'll need to file a police report, get an affidavit of fraud, and start the dispute process. It's long, and it's not easy." She said it with the same tone you'd use when telling someone their house burned down. It hit me then. I was going to be cleaning this mess up for years. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at an envelope with my name printed on it, but not in my handwriting. Inside was a copy of the loan contract. Signature didn't even match mine. Brian hadn't even tried to fake it well. He knew no one would ever look. That night, I didn't eat. Just sat there, thinking how quickly trust can rot when no one's watching. Thursday evening, I found Brian. He wasn't exactly hiding, just working a couple shifts at this grimy little garage 2 towns over. One of those places with a hand-painted sign that's been sun-faded for a decade, where half the cars on the lot don't even have license plates. It reeked of oil, stale coffee, and the kind of lies that come easy to men like my brother. He was under a hood when I pulled up. I stood there for a few seconds, watching his boots shift on the cracked pavement. He didn't notice me until I said his name. No surprise on his face. No panique. Just a long sigh and that crooked smirk he's been perfecting since we were kids. "Hey, Rick, you look tired." I didn't yell. I didn't swing. I asked him, plain as day, why he'd used my name, why he'd dragged me into his mess instead of owning it. He shrugged, said he had no choice, said I would have been fine, that I had a good thing going and could afford it. Like my stability was some kind of communal resource he could dip into whenever his latest gamble went belly up. Then came the worst part. He tried to laugh, said it all got blown out of proportion. Like 40 grand in stolen debt was a damn misunderstanding. I asked if he planned on paying any of it back. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Not unless I win the lottery." It was like looking at a stranger wearing my brother's face. Someone who'd already made peace with being a leech. No remorse, just excuses and a hint of amusement. I turned and walked away before I did something I regret. My fists were clenched the whole ride home. I think I left fingerprints in the steering wheel. That night, I called Grandma, told her everything. She didn't say much, just took a long breath and said, "Come by tomorrow." And when Evelyn says that, you come. Evelyn's house looked the same as it always had. White siding, wind chimes on the porch, flower pots that somehow never died no matter the season. But that morning, it felt different. Like the air around it had thickened. Like the house knew something serious was about to happen. She was waiting at the door, already dressed in one of her stiff-collared blouses and orthopedic shoes. Her silver hair pinned back tight. Not a hug, not a smile, just a nod and a "Come in, Richard." She only used my full name when she meant business. I sat at the kitchen table. She poured coffee without asking. No sugar, just the way I take it. We didn't talk much at first. The quiet tick of the clock on the wall filled the space between us. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder, manila, thick with neatly stacked papers. "Your parents intercepted over $39,000 in checks," she said. "I started keeping copies once your father got cagey about mailing addresses." I looked through them, dated, endorsed, signed on the back by Harold Dalton. My father. She sipped her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Then she said, "He thought I wasn't watching, but I was." I didn't even know what to say. My throat felt tight. That's when she dropped the real hammer. "I've already spoken to my attorney," she said. "They're out of the will. Both of them." I stared at her. Evelyn had always been the quiet glue that held this family together. Sunday dinners, birthday cards, polite silences. But now, she looked like someone who'd been waiting years for an excuse to cut the rope. "And the house," she added, nodding toward the room. "You'll get it when I go." I tried to protest. Told her I didn't need anything. I just wanted things to be made right. She shook her head. "Don't be noble now, Richard. Let them lie in the bed they made." And that was that. No ceremony. No drama. Just Evelyn, leveling decades of lies with a single breakfast conversation. By Friday morning, I was neck deep in paperwork. Legal documents, identity theft reports, notarized affidavits. I didn't even know half these forms existed. My dining table turned into a battlefield of pens, manila envelopes, and half-drunk coffee mugs. There's something humbling about standing in line at the police station with a folder full of proof that your own family screwed you. The woman at the desk barely blinked when I told her I was there to file a fraud report. She just handed me a clipboard and told me to take a seat. It felt surreal, like I was checking into a hotel I'd never booked under a name I didn't recognize anymore. After filing with the cops, I stopped by the courthouse and submitted everything to the fraud division. They said it would take time, months, maybe more. Investigations, hearings, verifications. Nothing quick, nothing easy. Meanwhile, that $40,000 debt still sat on my record like an open wound. I went to work the next day, and something about being back in that warehouse felt different. Like I was walking through fog. I caught myself missing pallets with a forklift twice. My boss didn't say anything, just gave me a look that said, "Whatever's eating you, handle it soon." That night, I sat on the kitchen floor eating a peanut butter sandwich straight from the jar. No plate, no TV, just the hum of the fridge and the silence of everything else. I checked my bank balance. Still low. Checked my credit score. Worse than I thought. And then I made a decision. No more waiting for someone to fix it. Not Evelyn. Not the cops. Not a lawyer. Me. I emailed a civil attorney that night. Told them everything. I was ready to press charges against Brian, against anyone who signed off on the loan. Blood or not. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, fine. I'd play the part. The attorney I reached out to, Mallory Kent, called me Monday morning. She had a clear voice, no nonsense, the kind of tone that didn't waste syllables on comfort. I like her instantly. She told me she'd handled identity fraud cases before, mostly family-related, sadly, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. This will be slow, and it'll hurt, she said, but it's winnable. That was the first time in weeks I'd heard anything that sounded like hope. We got to work. Mallory requested all the documentation from the bank and credit bureau. She walked me through what civil fraud meant, what could be proven, and how long it might take. We talked about pressing criminal charges too, but she warned me, prosecutors rarely go after family unless the fraud hits six figures or comes with public heat. That didn't mean we couldn't sue privately. She also asked a question that stopped me cold. Do you want to go after your parents too? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say no. I wanted to believe they'd been misled by Brian, that they just wanted to help their son and didn't fully understand what they were doing. But that folder Evelyn gave me, the one with 39 checks signed by my father, that folder didn't lie. So I told Mallory the truth. Yes. All of them. Because sometimes forgiveness has to wait until the bleeding stops. The next few weeks blurred into meetings, signatures, legal forms, and long nights reading about court precedents I didn't understand. At work, I kept quiet. Only two guys knew anything, and both gave me wide space. One of them, Dave, slid me a sandwich during break one day and said, "Family's the worst, man, but you'll crawl out." That stuck with me. At night, I started sleeping with a notebook by the bed, writing down thoughts, costs, deadlines. I didn't trust my memory anymore. Didn't trust much of anything. Except Evelyn. She called every other evening, never pried. Just reminded me to eat. Said, "Don't let them shrink you." I didn't plan to. The courthouse didn't look like justice. It looked like peeling paint, flickering fluorescents, and a soda machine that still sold RC Cola. But on a rainy Thursday afternoon, that's where I stood, file folder in hand, suit jacket wrinkled from the back seat of my truck, waiting for my name to be called. Brian showed up 20 minutes late, of course. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and that same damn smirk. Like this was all one big misunderstanding that could be waved away with a wink and a joke. He didn't bring a lawyer. Said he couldn't afford one. I had Mallory next to me, sharp-eyed and calm, flipping through notes like she'd been preparing for this her whole life. When the judge asked Brian if he admitted to taking the loan in my name, he hesitated. You could almost hear the little gears in his brain turning. Then he said, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just needed help." Mallory didn't flinch. She laid it all out. Signed documents, mismatched signatures, bank accounts tied to Brian's address. Then she showed the judge the copies of my grandmother's checks, each one endorsed by my father. Evelyn had even submitted a written statement. Said she would testify if needed. The judge didn't yell, didn't raise an eyebrow. Just read over the file, let the silence drag. Then finally said Brian was liable for damages and would be placed on a court-ordered repayment plan. As for the criminal side, that would be up to the DA's office. No promises there. When it was over, Brian turned to me in the hallway and muttered, "You didn't have to go this far." I didn't answer. Just walked past him. My parents didn't show. Not to court, not to apologize. Not even a text. I went home that night and made myself a real dinner. Steak, green beans, mashed potatoes. Sat down at the table and ate it slow. It wasn't victory, but it was peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't eating on the floor. A week after the hearing, I got a letter in the mail. Inside was a note, a spare set of keys, and an address scrawled on a yellow post. The duplex she used to rent out behind her house. "Time for a new start," she wrote. "You've earned it." I hadn't even asked for help. But there was quiet, steady, unshakable. Evelyn in a nutshell. The duplex hadn't been lived in for over a year, but the bones were good. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, a kitchen stuck in 1992. I spent the first 2 days sweeping dead bugs and scrubbing old tiles. The first night I slept there, I used a sleeping bag on the floor and listened to the cicadas buzzing through the cracked window screens. I didn't mind. It felt like mine. I told her I'd pay rent. She waved it off the way she used to swat at flies, like the very idea annoyed her. Just keep it up, she said. Make it yours. I bought paint, cheap, off-white buckets from the hardware store, and took a week off work. Painted the walls, replaced the light bulbs, hung up a clock that had been sitting in my closet for 2 years. Some nights I'd sit on the porch and stare across the back lot at Evelyn's window. She waved sometimes. Other times, she just left food in a container on my stoop. Banana bread, meatloaf, rice pudding. We didn't talk about Brian or my parents. Not anymore. Something had shifted, not just between me and them, but inside me. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't bracing for another lie. I had keys in my hand. I had quiet. I had a space of my own. And for the first time in years, I started to believe I might be okay. I thought cutting off contact would feel like ripping something out by the root. But it didn't. It felt like letting go of something I'd already buried. I blocked my parents' numbers the week after I moved into the duplex. There were no calls to block. Honestly, they hadn't reached out since the court hearing. No texts, no apologies. Just silence. And that silence started to feel like a kind of answer in itself. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering if they felt any regret. If they sat in their kitchen, staring at the same old wallpaper, wondering how it all went so wrong. But I stopped torturing myself with that kind of thinking. If there was guilt, they didn't show it. And if there wasn't, then I'd been clinging to a fantasy all my life. Brian never made a payment on the court order. Not one. The repayment plan was just ink on a page. Mallory warned me this might happen, so we could go back to court, garnish wages, if he ever found steady work. But I wasn't holding my breath. Not for Brian. That's the thing about people like him. They survive off the assumption that others will clean up after them. And for a long time, I did. Not anymore. One evening, I came home to find a letter taped to my front door. No return address. Just my name in blocky handwriting. I knew that chicken scratch right away. It was my father's. I didn't open it. I stood there for a minute, envelope in hand, then walked straight to the trash can and dropped it in. That act, small and quiet as it was, felt bigger than any shouting match could have ever been. I didn't need explanations. I didn't want a half-hearted excuse scribbled on cheap stationery. What I needed, what I chose, was peace. And sometimes peace sounds a lot like silence. It's been 7 months since that dinner table bombshell. The seasons changed. The vines around Evelyn's porch turned red and brittle. Then came snow, then rain, now the first hints of spring. I planted tulips last weekend in the patch behind the duplex. I don't know much about gardening, but Evelyn swears they'll bloom if I leave them alone. She's doing fine. Slower now, but sharper than ever. We have dinner once a week, no big ritual, just stew or pot roast, or sometimes store-bought pizza we pretend is homemade. We don't talk about my parents, or Brian, or the missing pieces. We just exist, and that's enough. Work got better. I'm not a supervisor or anything special, but I show up, I keep moving, and I've started sleeping through the night again. Credit's still bad. Debt still lingers. But I've learned to stop measuring my worth by numbers on a statement. One afternoon, while sorting some old boxes, I found a picture of me and Brian when we were kids. We were in a plastic pool in Grandma's backyard, popsicles dripping down our arms, both of us sunburned and smiling like idiots. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I slid it back in a box and taped it shut, not out of anger, not out of pain, just peace. This isn't the life I planned. I didn't imagine rebuilding trust would start with losing a family. I didn't picture myself scraping paint off a decades-old window frame, alone in silence. But maybe that's the point. Somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for an apology, and I started building something that didn't need one.